Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Soul Sister Speaks. My name is Jemai. I'm your host, and I am very pleased to be seated next to the one and only Kennedy Durham. Kennedy, do you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Kennedy, and I got a call to come here, and I answered it. So I'm from Rowlett. I'm a senior. I'm studying corporate communication. I have an older sister who just got married, which is really exciting to see their love. My parents split when I was 10. And yeah, my dad passed away 2 years ago. So whenever I was in high school and the early part of college before he died, I think like my kind of story and my whole like spiel was kind of, well, God wouldn't do this. Like, this isn't God. We live in a sinful world. Like, this is by chance. This is, maybe not meant to be. I don't really believe that. But just, I kind of didn't have, maybe a little bit in high school, but I didn't have like a lot of blame going towards God. My dad was in and out of ICU and things like that. And so the first time he went to ICU, like for a couple weeks, I was in 9th grade. And that was like kind of a turning point for me because I think I was like upset at God, but I was still like trying to keep a good heart. And I felt like guilty if I were to be upset, I think, but then still go to church and things like that, even though my head wasn't really in it. So I feel like I kind of overcame that and got out of that. And then when I was a freshman in college, it happened again, and I was actually pretty okay with it. Like, I was like, well, God didn't do this and this, like I kind of made that my testimony, and my thing was like, I didn't place blame on him and instead was like, well, we live in a world that's imperfect. But when he died, I had a very big shift and I put all of my blame on God. My dad died kind of, not unexpectedly because he's been sick forever, but I saw him on a Tuesday, spent the night, and then Wednesday morning I went to work, he was good, and then on Thursday morning he died. And so, yeah, that's kind of it, but I think I've changed in a lot of ways from it, but I'm still trying to kind of like get out of this blame game kind of a little bit, but my dad and I were really close, and so it was hard for me to feel like, well, this just happens and this is just life, and that like I didn't feel that way. I felt pretty negative.
Yeah. I had a similar season just in January. It wasn't dealing with the loss, but it was dealing with something where I remember experiencing that. I remember experiencing anger with God for the first time.
Right.
And I don't even think it was my first time. I think it was just the first time where I wasn't able to pretend I wasn't angry. Like, I think there have been other times where, like, I was genuinely upset with God. But I was like, oh, but God, you're still. And
you're so good.
Yeah. And it's like, that stuff doesn't change. But for the first time, I was like, I don't even have that fake fight in me. And so I remember being in that season and, like, the only thing I took out of it was that, like, God really doesn't, like, he didn't stop loving me when I was angry with him. And I never knew it was, like, safe or permissible to be angry. So I understand what you mean about that guilt of, like, but you're sovereign. Like, you could have stopped it, or you could have made this thing happen.
Yeah. Well, and you hear stories like that. People who have fought cancer forever, and then there was a switch. And so I kind of felt like if you were all powerful and all good, like if God was all powerful and all good, this wouldn't have happened to me. And so I think like I was trying to kind of navigate that, but yeah, it was the first time that I like really accepted that I was angry and didn't know how much fight I could give. Yeah. I think.
Do you feel like there's still any like doubt in you now about like the character or the nature of God?
I mean, I think a little. I mean, it'll be 2 years in May, and so I would say like some. I haven't gone to church consistently since, and which makes me feel sad because my dad was a believer, and that was important to him, and it was important to him that, you know, we found Christ as well. But yeah, I would say there's definitely like a part of me still that is trying to kind of get out of that, and because I still feel that way a little bit, but like trying to remember that God is good, and that's been a little bit difficult, I think, for me, even now. Yeah.
And I thank you for being honest about that, because I'm sure many people, it's kind of like, if I can, like, knowing that I'm not the only one who has felt like this.
Right.
It's almost like, I feel like it allows us to feel it and then move through it when we give ourselves that permission to feel it. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
But even in spite of that, I wanted to ask, what did you learn about, like, enduring these seasons and still going through, because this stuff does take time, like you mentioned earlier. What have you learned about people and, like, I guess, like, the limitations of people, you know?
I learned that people are really uncomfortable with loss and grief and sadness. Like, I mean, if I were to be bawling right here, you know, even you might feel a certain type of way about that. Like, people are just uncomfortable kind of by sadness, and I don't know if that comes from like the patriarchy along, you know, originally, and men don't cry. Like, I'm not really sure the root of that, but I learned that people are uncomfortable with that, and sometimes it makes them deal with their own stuff, and that can be uncomfortable. And so I kind of learned about that, and I had never seen that. A lot of people didn't know how to handle me crying and me breaking down and me feeling this type of way, either because they had never experienced something hard themselves, or didn't want to deal with the things that they had, or that brought up some of the things that they have gone through, and they didn't want to process that through me and like through that loss. And so yeah, I was really surprised to kind of see that, because you feel like you have a really close, tight-knit circle who you could go through anything together, and there's kind of these expectations, I think, as friends, that you're going to be there together through anything. And so yeah, I think I definitely learned limits on people, and like I said, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be with somebody who's really sad and really hurting. But I've also seen a lot of good in people too, which has been awesome and helpful, of course.
There's a name of God, and it's El-Gibhor, and it translates to mighty God. It talks about the might, the strength, like the unmoving and unchanging nature of God. What can you say about that, about how you've had these varying emotions towards God, and even in that season now, but how God, he doesn't change just because our feelings towards him does?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like freaking crazy. I mean, we've all been in situations where like somebody doesn't like us, and you're like, okay, well, screw you. I don't like you either. You know what I mean? And so that's not the nature of him. That's like a wild thing. You know what I mean? So
no, but I think also, like, within your story and other people's stories, we I think our minds, as limited as they are, we're so conditioned to human relationships.
Right.
The first relationships that I experienced were relationships with people. And so I've been conditioned to understand that with human beings, we do not love unconditionally.
No, we
Matter
don't.
of fact, we do not love unconditionally to the point where like someone can love you when you love them.
Right.
But when you stop loving them, there's a chance that they might stop loving you or that they'll love you less.
Yeah.
Our love and our emotions, they fluctuate all the time.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
when I came to know God and I experienced his love, I'm like, oh wow, like this is that agape love.
Right.
It feels good. I was so scared when my feelings towards God started to change in certain seasons because I thought that his love for me would change too.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Well, and I also think too, like we keep talking about unconditional love, and you know, people don't have that. People aren't always like that, and I think that was something that I felt sad about too, just in the way, like this is kind of off of what we've been talking about, but I felt kind of sad to be a Christian when I saw people like scrutinizing different communities and different types of people, and like I felt really upset that like there were people who went to church and had a relationship with God, but were being like brutal and rude to different types of people who weren't like them. Yeah. And so I think that made me feel like, oh, I don't want that, because I think we are called to love other people, our neighbor as ourselves. And so I always felt I have felt disappointed kind of by people being conditional to everyone around them. And instead of being like, look at all of these different communities and groups of people, and even people of different religions, like we are called to love everybody and give everybody grace. And so I think that like that's kind of my biggest thing, is like getting other people to recognize, no, you are called to love every single person that you meet. I just like that's my thing, and that's what I want to call people to do, is like WWJD, baby. Like, so I mean, that's like, as crazy and silly as that sounds, that's something that I like want people to be as well. And so, you know, like love like God would. And I know that that's not easy. We're humans, but just like making an active effort, I think, is important, you know?
In you talking about communities, as much as we're called to be ambassadors of Christ and to like demonstrate his love to other people, because that's what a lot of people assume who Christ is based off how they see those who worship and have given their life to Christ.
Of course. Why would you want to, you know, like in my opinion, why would you want to be a part of a group and experience God's love if you've only seen the people that have experienced God's love being hurtful to you? Yeah.
And so I think it's a call for those of us who walk with Jesus Christ to really, you know, they say they'll know you by your fruits. But I also think, more importantly, my desire is for people to understand that we're still imperfect people.
Of course.
Honestly, the best thing that anyone could do is to give their lives to Jesus Christ and experience him for themselves and understand that, wow, although I've seen some of his representatives and some of his ambassadors do some things that are kind of wishy-washy, I've experienced him for myself, and I've seen that he really is exactly who he says he is. I used to feel this pressure to like, and I would say it's like a healthy pressure to always represent Jesus Christ well, because I'm always talking about Jesus. Like, I don't want anybody to catch me slipping and be like, because people will remember that one bad thing. But above all else, it's to not have people drawn to me, or even solely or predominantly to Christian communities, but to Christ himself, because we're all going to let you down. We're all going to change. But Jesus Christ, he never changes, and he's always going to be there. Like, I think his consistency and his constancy, it is unfathomable, because we spend so much time around people who aren't that, but he really is that, you know?
Right. Yes, 100%. And I think that like what you said too is yes, we, like, the community of Christians can fail to represent him well, but you want, like, we as people want others to experience it for himself. But I do think that we play a role in that. Like, it can be as simple as holding the door, or like just, or whatever, just like being a good person. I think that even if they don't know your religion, even if they don't know your stance, they can look back and be like, wow, she was really sweet. And then kind of get their mind going, like, well, why? Is this something that, like, ethics were just taught in their house? Or, like, why, I don't think people need to be kind because they're Christian, like, or whatever. I think people can be kind on their own, but just kind of being a little light in people's day, I think can go such a long way without even realizing. Like, when I was driving here, like, get here safe, like, even just something as little as that, where I was like, oh my God, like, it's just so refreshing to see that. And I call people to do that, and God calls people to do that too. I want to encourage that.
No, I love that you made that point. I love that you said that, especially how you said they may not know your religious beliefs. They may not know that it's because you follow Christ that you're doing what you're doing, but they don't have to know for them to still be given the opportunity to experience a little bit of the light of Christ through you.
And like I said, I don't want people to just be a good person because God says to. I think people just need to be good people because, but being light and being kindness and being joy in any small instance can really make a difference. And calling people to just, like, have a spark of interest and figure out who he is and why he is and what he is, I think it's life-changing.
The last question that I want to ask, just to take it back to the name of God that we talked about, El-Gibhor, the mighty one, how he is strong, powerful, he does not change.
Right.
What can you say as far as, because I feel like there's a common theme in this episode, both as people who have had changing feelings towards God and change themselves and have experienced others changing when we needed them. What could you say about the never-changing characteristics of God, even as someone whose feelings towards him are still changing in this season?
Yeah, well, and I think you're right. Like, I think we've kind of landed on that theme. And I want to, like, encourage people to be okay with that. Like, it's okay to feel upset, and it's okay to be angry, and it is okay and valid to have negative feelings. But I think it's a really, really, really important thing too, if you can and you have the ability to remember that is not returning. Like, that is not coming back to you. It is only love and positivity and grace. And I think that can be hard. Like I said, it's like if you're screaming or cussing someone out and they're just like, I love you, you're amazing. You're like, wait, what a minute? Like, what? Like, that's, almost, it can be even more frustrating. You know what I mean? Like, why are you being so nice? So I think, like, lean into that and lean into remembering that he is constant and he is loving and he is good. And it's not easy. Like I said, it can almost make you even more frustrated, but it's so important. And he is mighty and he is loving. And that's like what I want people to, like, remember. Loss sucks, grief sucks, sadness sucks. Like, we all know that, but it's important to recognize that you have a really good and loving sounding board and somebody who's, like, going to give you a never-ending hug always if you want it.
Yeah. Amen. This was so necessary. Like, I honor you for your realness. It's not easy to come on a platform and be like, hey, I'm in the middle of a season where, the storms are blowing and I'm going through certain things. My emotions are moving. Like, it's not easy to be as it's not easy to be as honest and vulnerable as you were and as you are, yet still do such a great and honest job at declaring the goodness of God. Like this is how I feel towards him, but I know that this is still who he is. Right. And that duality of our emotions and our beliefs and feelings, like, you expressed it so beautifully in a way that's so encouraging to so many people. And so I want to thank you once again. I love you all so much. Thank you all so much for watching. This is episode 10 of Soul Sister Speaks, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Tell about the healer. Greater is the one within and call him as the leader. Teach her how to hold a pretty hand up to the sky. Never wait upon the giver, he'll deliver like a dealer. To take her high.